want to go to my guest, and I don't want to keep my guest waiting. We are joined, the man himself, Jeff Rich. How you doing, Jeff? You doing okay tonight?
Doing very well, Jamal. Yourself?
I am doing okay. Jeff Rich, author, historian, podcaster, worked 33 years in government, now retired. He currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime of studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give us context to a changing world. You can find Jeff on his great YouTube channel, The Burning Archive, and on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. And again, Jeff, when I say it's a really good channel, it is a really good channel. And your esteemed host,
amazing guests
yes,
on the channel.
yeah, your esteemed host was a guest on the show today. So shout out to Jeff for inviting me on. Much appreciated. I really do. It's like Dr. Jeff Rich wants you on the show, and it's like, really? He wants me on the show? I'm just some rando. No, man, thank you for that. I do appreciate it.
It was great.
What do you make of China's Victory Day celebration? So, for example, we have this spectacle that took place. And of course, this was something that people were talking about because on China's side, it was a little sloppy when China was doing this. Oh, wait, that's not China's marching horribly. That's America's military parade. Let's go. I'm sorry. My bad, China. My bad. My bad. No, I'm sorry. I meant to show this, I suppose. Yeah, let's go to this one. When pomp and circumstance is an understatement, right? Yeah. Like they went to the nines on this.
The precision of that gesture as he sort of flew the flag out was just amazing, wasn't it?
I mean, all of it was like so precise. Like there was one of the images was of the military guys jumping into the vehicles, the way they would break off almost in this kind of robotic, mechanical, complete precision way. I mean, and you're talking about hundreds of thousands of men, and in some cases women, because they even showed the brigades of women who were involved. It is impressive. It is very impressive. Like for example, here's one. This is one I wanted to find. All right, this is, yeah, right here. All right, so here is the one I was looking at earlier. Look at this. Let me blow it up so people can. That's intense. All of them in perfect unison. That is impressive.
It's very remarkable.
Yeah, that is impressive. It is remarkable. That's a hell of a parade. Do you think that the difference in America and the way that they do it is because we lost like 400,000? They lost 20 million, and so it matters more, it cuts more? Or do you think something else is going on why they do this so much better? I mean, Russia also, they put on a hell of a parade.
Yeah, I mean, it means a hell of a lot. I mean, obviously to lose 20 million people, I mean, the estimates vary as well. And I mean, really, it's a defining period in the history of modern China. It leads into the Civil War, or you could say the continuation of the Civil War post 1945, and ultimately the Chinese Revolution in 1949. So, and the historian Rana Mitter has written quite a lot about the way in which World War II, as much as anything now, is the important sort of national mythology, if you like, for the People's Republic of China. Like people often talk about the century of humiliation and all that sort of thing. But in many ways, it's actually World War II, which is more important and has been given a lot more focus. And so I guess the meaning and the motivation, is the thing that drives people on to orchestrate and choreograph and practice and discipline themselves to, I mean, how many practices would those people have had to done to march in that way? And I guess that's not really part of the military culture. I mean, I'm obviously not connected with the military culture, but of the United States anymore. But it doesn't really seem to be part of the military culture of most Western countries. So it is extraordinarily impressive. I mean, I mean, I didn't watch it all. And there was a significant part of it with all the displays of the weapons and all that sort of stuff,
Yes.
and which is I guess if you like that kind of stuff, it's
Yeah. Like,
impressive.
look at my gun. Look at my nukes. Yeah.
Look at my nukes. No, I mean there were some very significant points being made. I heard in the commentary about the nukes in terms of protecting the nation, but also safeguarding world peace and all that sort of stuff. And some of those technologies, I believe, are beyond the capacity of some of the Western powers at the moment as well. So it was definitely a display of power and technological prowess as well.
What's more important in us, at least that I thought was more important, and this kind of blends. It's wild how all of this stuff blurs. You go into like the SEO, and then you flow right into this. One of the things that Xi Jinping said, and I want to get your take on it because I agree with him. It was ideally the purpose behind the United Nations, and the United Nations is not serving that purpose. When you get cynical people like me, not entirely cynical, but saying there is no such thing as international law if you have 30% of the countries violating it. But China, Russia, Iran, and you can say BRICS nations, but the SEO has made a very consistent argument. And I think my thing has always been, it seemed, and I think I'm right on this, that two arguments are being played out on the world stage. One is unilateralism, represented through the force of the US and the way that the US is this kind of naked hegemon at this point, where it's not like we want you to agree with us and come on our side. It's we want to force you to agree with us. We're going to use force, compulsion in some particular way to do it. And you have this other argument that's being made of, we believe countries are inviolable. We believe that there's sovereignty. We don't believe that other countries should be able to use force and attack other nations. We believe that we're equals. This hegemon stuff is nonsense. We believe that there's a rule of law. And that is being espoused through China, Russia, et cetera. And I know it's a bit ironic because Russia's at war. But still, this is the argument that is being made on the other side of it. We are not trying to intercede into your politics. You have your governments in the way that you want, but we do want to engage and work with you as equals. Xi Jinping made this speech, and I'm not going to play all of it because it's a bit long, but I do want to play part of it for you and get your take on it.
The Cold War mentality, hegemonism, and protectionism continue to haunt the world. New threats and challenges have been only increasing. The world has found itself in a new period of turbulence and transformation. Global governance has come to a new crossroads. History tells us that at difficult times, we must uphold our original commitment to peaceful coexistence, strengthen our confidence in win-win cooperation, advance in line with the trend of history, and thrive in keeping pace with the times. To this end, I wish to propose the Global Governance Initiative. It follows my previous global initiatives, namely Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative.
Now, to break this down, what he's saying in this is a few points. One, okay, I need to close this. There we are. One, adhering to sovereign equality, abiding by international rule of law, practicing multilateralism, avoiding or advocating for people-centered approach, and focusing on taking real action. Now, they agree with him on this at the SEO. that is profound, and yet not profound in a weird way. And I guess it's
Yeah.
profound in the sense that that's not the way our world works. Give me your take on
Well,
this.
well, that's right, and it goes back partly to the commemoration of 1945 and what Rana Mitter says about the importance of World War II commemoration as well, because and like Rana Mitter is a pretty mainstream but very distinguished and very good historian of China. So he so China has consistently said that it supports the United Nations. It's very proud of the fact that China, although not then the People's Republic of China, but China was in fact the first country to sign the United Nations Charter in San Francisco in 1945 or whenever it was. And there has been this argument over a long time as to whether, China wants to be a revisionist power to sort of change the world order. And arguably, at times, under Mao's leadership in the 60s and stuff like that, it probably was. Of course, in the 1960s, because of the United States, Taiwan was represented at China's seat at the UN rather than the People's Republic of China.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly over the last, 30, 40 years, China, as it's been rising, has consistently been advocating these principles of multilateralism and support for the UN Charter and so on. And in many ways, certainly the first three principles of, what he articulates in this speech, and viewers can actually read the speech in an English translation on the Chinese Foreign Ministry kind of website. I actually have it up in front of me. And what's sort of really interesting, I think, and is reflected in the other aspects of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is that China's been talking about a couple of these sort of global civilization initiatives and improvements to global governance for some time. But it seems to be now wanting to not just sort of, if you like, do it by itself, so to speak, but to do it together with the other partners in Shanghai Cooperation, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, including India, including Russia, and is, I guess, sharing the responsibility, so to speak, and is also, it's the last principle about delivering real results, because I think there has been a bit of a criticism of China that it is this sort of high-minded principles and statements about the right thing to do, but not necessarily backed up by more substantive action. And my read of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Declaration is there's a shared determination amongst those countries to deliver more tangible results out of this kind of multilateralism, and also to do some of these things like the Global Civilizations Initiative and Security and the Global Governance Initiative together. And similarly to the Shanghai Declaration, Tianjin Declaration, very much affirmed, the United Nations is the irreplaceable bedrock of the international system, and all the action in the SCO and BRICS and all that sort of stuff is about bringing up all the other players in the system, so that the United States can't sort of stand at the top of the hill and sort of steer down on the rest of the world anymore. Yeah, so I do think it is quite a significant thing, and I think some of the India-China rapport kind of stuff. There's all the optics about it as well, but my sense also is there's a bit more commitment to act together through some of these multilateral organisations, and and be a little bit more, and I guess for China to give a little bit more without, criticising China. I don't want to bring anyone's wrath down upon me, but I think there is a not unreasonable perception that, China's talk the talk but not necessarily walk the walk with some of these principles, for understandable reasons, and it's in a different position now, and it's much more critical that it does it now, but it does seem to be more genuinely sharing some of the sharing some of the responsibilities, sharing some of the power as well.
It seems to not want to work unilaterally, like in the way that the U.S. work unilaterally. Like it seems to want to use these organizations as a means of, okay, let's have a shared collective vision. Like, for example, the SEO. Well, the United Nations didn't condemn the attack on Iran, which you would think that if you stuck by UN principles, they would have. It wasn't like the UN Security Council was going to come in to Iran's rescue, because the countries that were perpetrating the attack were on the UN Security Council. Whereas the Shanghai Cooperation Organization did. They were okay saying this is outrageous. And not just this is outrageous. How do you not see it as outrageous that the US unprovoked attacked another country in this way, or for that matter, Israel unprovoked attacked another country? I mean, I understand this idea that the UN Charter is inviolable. Valuable. I'm butchering that word.
Inviolable. Yep.
Thank you, inviolable. But it is being violated constantly. Like, is the thought that these other multi-organizations overlap, be it BRICS, be it SEO, be it Belt and Road, when you have all of these other countries that are part of these organizations, that they work in tandem through the mechanism of the United Nations to try to reinvigorate it? Is that the thought? I mean, because at the end of the day, you still have the US, its vassals, on the Security Council.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I mean, that's an incredibly difficult problem to solve. I mean, because the United States has been unilateralist and obstreperous about the United Nations almost from the beginning.
Right.
At one point, the sort of Anglo-American intellectuals saw the United Nations as the Anglo-American committee to rule the world, and it changed very substantially in the 1960s and 1970s with decolonisation, the growth in the number of independent nations and all that sort of stuff. But how do you solve a problem like America? To sort of vibe a famous musical song, and because it's very difficult. I mean, it's got military bases everywhere. It's got this, difficult politics. It's got the sort of supremacist attitude. So you kind of don't want to push it too far, and you don't want to sort of destroy yourself, I guess, in a blaze of glory of standing on principle. So, so it's a terribly difficult thing. But I do feel that it's sort of like, building up multilateral cooperation around the United Nations so that everyone's less isolated, everyone's less, down in the sort of the low seats rather than up in the high seats.
Right.
I think that is probably going to be an effective solution over time. I think the proof will be in the pudding, and it's not an immediate solution to some of the grossest, problems, that we all know about right now. And some of the problems that need to be solved together through discussion, negotiation, and compromise between countries, like any number of things. People might have different views, but climate change, all these sort of very transnational problems. They're terribly difficult to solve even within one country. To do it within many countries is even more difficult. So it's not going to be, you can't expect instant instant gratification, but to establish the institutions and the processes and the habits of working together, I think, are important. And that's partly, at least what I see in this Shanghai Cooperation Organization Declaration, is a little bit more of the, I mean, just reading it as an ex-government official, it's not just high-minded statements. There's a high-minded statement about security, and there's some very specific, comments on condemning terror attacks, including the Pahalgam terror attack, but also the attack on Iran, and also a couple of attacks in Pakistan as well.
Right.
Which is like, that's a sensible, practical compromise. There was a real standoff over the whole issue of the Pahalgam terrorist attack, and they sort of managed to work it out, saying, hey, we're all affected by this issue, let's condemn them all.
Yes.
But what I was really trying to say was that they're setting up a sort of security centre in the sort of Central Asian countries. They're setting up a anti-drug trafficking sort of transnational centre in the Central Asian countries, and drug trafficking has been a very difficult problem in those countries over decades and decades and decades. So there's tangible, practical cooperation, and by having those institutions of tangible, practical cooperation, you just build up the habit and the processes and the trust of being, I guess, good neighbours, and having differences but not letting them become, so unmanageable that you end up with violent conflict. So it's sort of like, just sort of casting a different net over the world, rather than expecting, one big sudden change to suddenly, create a sort of new world order by fiat. So it's a commitment to many, many years of work. But I mean, that's what real practical resolution of differences between interest groups within a country is. It's the same thing as resolving the practical differences between countries through diplomacy rather than war. It's not glamorous. It's slow and boring. You have to listen to a lot of dull speeches, and spend a lot of time thinking, how can we finesse these words so people are not going to get upset? And it can seem ridiculous at a time, in one way, but to spend a couple of days working out, well, how can we work out a declaration on condemning terrorism attacks that achieves what India really needed to achieve, which was a clear condemnation of the Pahalgam terror attack, while also not sort of kind of putting Pakistan so much in a box. It's going to sort of create problems, and that was a real issue of tension between India and China in the months before this summit. As much as the border issue as anything, it was the whole, the defence partnership, I guess, between Pakistan and China, and the conflict between India and Pakistan. So, I do see some of that unglamorous creation of institutions and processes as something important, and that's sort of what he's sort of referring to in this global governance initiative. Yeah.
But I think the issue we're all going to have to confront is the issue of bad faith.
Yeah.
And the issue of this idea of, I am strong enough to not care and to push my agenda regardless. And I would use words like, well, yeah, we're trying to stop Venezuelan drugs as we are on the coast of Venezuela with nuclear submarines and warboats and 4,000 Marines. Or, yeah, we believe that Iran is trying to build nuclear weapons. A, why is that your issue? There's that. And B, the idea that you're going to attack Iran for this nonsense. And C, Israel has nukes. So It's like, shut up about it. But they're not. And they're going to come up with all sorts of words and justifications. None of these things are done in good faith, and use it as a pretext to launch attacks without any condemnation for the United Security Council. For example, I'll give you an example. When they finally got the United States to say, okay, you've shamed us into accepting a resolution for a ceasefire, what did the Biden administration come out and say? The Biden administration came out and said, this is a non-binding resolution from the UN Security Council. It's like, I wasn't aware that UN Security Councils pass non-binding resolutions. But again, if you get a bad faith actor who has no intention, who has such skin in the game, and thinks to themselves, well, we're a superpower, we don't have to pay attention to this. This is rules-based. Then you can't have the UN work in that context. It just doesn't. It's functionally inept. It is impotent in the truest sense of the word, like a 40, 80-year-old man on blood pressure medication. Can't get it up. You can't do anything. And then you have these institutions that would co-sign nonsense. So the attack in Syria for the chemical weapons thing, you have literally people on the ground who wrote the original report saying the report that they gave is not the report that we wrote. That's bogus. They made it up in order to go after Syria. I mean, I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you fix the institution like that.
Well, I think you build better alternative processes, I guess, fundamentally. I mean, like the UN Security Council issue, there's been, proposals for reform of the membership of the UN Security Council since, I think, the early 70s or late 1960s. It's been going for that long. And there's a working group that's sort of looking, that's focused a little bit more in recent years also on some of the processes, because it's those kind of things that you just mentioned. We're just not going to pay attention to this one. That's what a non-binding resolution means, and in a way, there is value in that because you can sort of it's sort of like an agree to disagree sort of resolution, and given some of the conflicts between states are very difficult to resolve, it can be good to have a sort of a way to just let off a bit of steam without causing a big spat. But what the SCO has been doing and what the BRICS have been doing is they've been, I guess, modelling and practicing and developing, better processes of doing it. And over time, assuming the violent conflicts in the world give us this time, but over time, that is just going to create a environment where people say, well, this is just what we expect to happen. Like, you can't do this sort of crap anymore. And especially with America's diminishing power, its diminishing influence, which, for the last 6 months, the world's patience with America, or Trump, Trump America, is just really fallen into a hole, and is not going to recover easily. But over time, people are going to sort of say, well, when we talk with China, or when we talk with India and Russia, or when we talk with all three of them together, they treat us with respect, they make real commitments, they, give us money without, saying we're going to slap tariffs on you or whatever. And we're discovering that, there's actually other ways we can go about doing some of these processes. We can trade in our own currencies. We don't have to use the US dollar. We can go to Eurasian sports events rather than the Olympic Games. We can go to all these other sort of things that ultimately just sort of, I guess, crowd out the shouty sort of Western approach to diplomacy. So I mean, it's a long game and a slow game, and I would say it's also one that does need to be backed by force. Uh, just as, if you like, India's in principle condemnation of terrorism
Mhm.
was backed by the force it applied in, Operation Sindoor. It knocked out terrorist bases. So I don't think any of these states are excluding the possibility of using force, but I think they're all aware of the fact that, it's not going to do anyone any good to pick a fight that you can't win. But I really do feel at some point there's going to be, a crisis. It will be like the crack in the wood just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and ultimately it's going to snap, and that will create a moment where, assuming there are people with sufficient skill and diplomacy and initiative and, I guess, intellect to seize the moment, that will be the moment to sort of restructure the kind of institutions. And no one knows when that could happen.
Yeah.
And, after 6 months of Donald Trump, I reckon it's probably a lot closer than it was in late 2024, because the American position in the world has really suffered. I mean, its reputation is just in tatters now.
It's just a desperate hegemon. I mean, that's what it seems to be. It's like it's degrading.
Yeah,
And this picture, God, man, it says 1,000 words. Putin is isolated. Putin is by himself, and yet, look at this.
yeah,
And that's not even SEO. That's just the parade. He's
yeah.
on
That's
Xi
the
Jinping's
parade.
right
Yeah,
hand side,
yeah,
and then you compare that to this.
yeah,
What
yeah.
a difference! In one
You see,
sense, they're getting lectured. Not you, Maloney. Never you,
yeah,
Maloney. Not you,
yeah,
Maloney, who's sitting in the corner over here, who's very upset,
yeah,
embarrassed, doesn't want to be
yeah,
there. Um, but in the other case, we're walking together. There are
yeah,
no hegemons. We're
yeah,
together. We're united, etc. These are
yeah,
two radically different views of the world
yeah,
and the way
yeah.
that Europe has isolated itself compared to the rest of the planet. That's amazing.
Well, it's interesting if you just go back to the White House picture. The Alexander Stubb, who's the president of Finland, who's the man to the on Macron's left,
Right here.
so sort of writing his note with the glasses there. He's the president of Finland, and he's quite a relatively intellectual politician. He actually wrote a book about geopolitics not so long ago,
I'm sorry to
where
interrupt you real quick, Jeff. That's the one who said that Finland beat the Soviets in the war.
yes, that's right,
Yeah.
that's right. And but he's also made a comment just today that I don't have the exact words in front of me, but saying
Mhm.
that unless Europe and the United States start, it basically says that Europe and the United States have got to start cooperating more with the rest of the world, because we're just totally losing our sort of reputation and influence. And more than that, we're just not achieving anything.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, in my stream earlier today, I was talking to a former Australian ambassador who actually commented that that remark about Finland might have a bit of sort of, you might need to read between the lines of some of that, because there were aspects of the way in which the Finland achieved neutrality and a decent relationship with the Soviet Union that he might have been referring to, that actually might hint at some more practical and longer term ideas as to how to actually get a decent political and diplomatic settlement in
They lost
Ukraine.
territory and they effectively were very compliant with the
Yeah,
Soviet Union after that.
yeah. But I guess what he was hinting at was as in the Australian diplomat, ex-Australian diplomat, was that there, behind the tough words, there may well be actually quite a few more hard-headed proposals that are actually sort of saying, well, we actually really, we know we've lost and we do need to find a political solution here.
I see.
And yeah. So it's sort of interesting, and I just think that is a sign of this process as well. That even Alexander Stubb, who to some degree has been, one of the champions of Ukraine and of the the Visegrad countries, the sort of Eastern European countries, is talking about, I guess, repositioning European diplomacy at least, and perhaps also with that, perhaps advocating a little bit of a shift of approach from the United States as well. Maybe I'm grasping at straws, but this is, I guess, what I mean, that a lot of the positive development in some of this sort of multilateral processes is not the kind of stuff that gets reported in the media, because you don't want it to be reported in the media. You want to actually be able to sit down with someone and say, what really are your issues? What really are your bottom lines? And can we test a few ideas with you without going to the media about it, because that will compromise our discussions and that sort of stuff. So I think there is a I guess because we're all so used to following the news and commenting instantly on how everything works, we sometimes forget, difficult issues are often best resolved between people in private rather than on a public stage. And
Agreed.
And the same thing applies to international diplomacy.
But then you get people like this, and I love her to death. I love her to dress. I think she's very attractive, but I think she's very dumb.
Callis.
This is the one who, this is the one who was like, if we can't beat Russia, how are we going to beat China? And it's like, dude, you're losing a war, and you're contemplating your next war. That's astonishing, right? Yeah. This is her.
Although I think that
I love it when she makes comments.
I don't want to be seen to be Callis's defender, but her comment about the China thing, I always interpreted as it was that she was having a go at Donald Trump, saying, you can't pull out of Ukraine, because if you really want to fight China, you've just shown that you actually can't even fight Russia and Ukraine. But
but she was using the we.
Yeah.
We, us, and you're also.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I get her argument. It's like, if we can't beat Russia, how are we gonna beat China? It's such a bigger country. I mean, oh my God, China is so big. It's so big. Oh my God. And it's like, and I'm like, dude, yes. Like, I get your confusion. Like, meaning the existential crisis that she was in that moment, that she was trying to explain that. It's like, yes, that's the point. Why are you, A, still fighting this war with Russia, and B, why are you contemplating some kind of conflict with China?
True.
It's like, dude, I understand your point. I understand she was going after Trump, saying, well, how are you pulling out of this and still want to go after China? But she was using this as if all of Europe was right alongside with them on this. And it's like, why are you on side with them on this? Yeah. I mean, even if you're making an argument to Trump on this, why are you lumping in on what you obviously clearly can see is a fool's errand? Because even in your mind, you're bringing it up as this kind of fool's errand.
There absolutely needs to be like some shift in personnel in the EU leadership, I think, for there to be any real progress in all of this. But did you want to show me this
I'm gonna play this clip for you. Yeah. I love it when she talks. I always say she looks like my ex, so it's always wow to watch her talk. And why can't I hear you?
Of the Ukrainians as well as Europeans, because any deal has to be implemented by Europeans. So
I
that
can't
that
hear
was
her. All right. What she's effectively saying is any deal that takes place in Europe has to include Europe.
Hmm.
And we are not talking to the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, I mean, how are you going to make a
Yeah.
deal without the Russians?
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is kind of part of the problem, right? The Europeans have been talking to themselves over and over. Security guarantees is another really good example. They spent months talking to themselves about security guarantees
Hmm.
when all of this talk didn't really matter because Russia was never going to accept what they've been postulating amongst themselves for security guarantees. And I think what Europe is also missing is there's a British saying about having a lot of mouth but no swords. They have no swords. Like the mighty Estonian military is not going to fight the Russians. The Brits couldn't put out 20,000 troops if they needed to in a heartbeat, like to make that work. Will the French public be okay with Macron sacrificing French people to get killed on the killing fields of Ukraine? I'm very skeptical for this, and yet they have
Look,
the loudest mouth.
paradoxical as I mean, maybe I'm being devil's advocate here, but
Go for it.
paradoxical. I mean, she does have a point because there is no enduring peace settlement in Ukraine without Europe, because Europe is Ukraine's neighbor as Europe as it is Russia's neighbor.
Right.
It will be the home of all the Ukrainian refugees, or 90% of them. It will be the part funder of the reconstruction of Ukraine. And, just as I guess Ukraine was, Europe's Europe's largest army in its conflict with Russia, its own conflict with Russia as much as the US's conflict of Russia, whatever's left of a Ukrainian army is presumably going to be having some kind of military cooperation with Europe into the future, of some kind at least.
Will
So,
it? Will it?
well,
Now, in Istanbul, just to be clear, in Istanbul
yeah,
agreements, it was Russia that was giving security guarantees to Ukraine, not Europe.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, so in that sense, I think she's right. But it's kind of this, standoff at the moment because Trump's or the US's approach to ending the war has been as unilateralist in relationship to all the parties in Ukraine as the US's approach to every foreign policy issue is. And the reality is, it's not just the US's fight. Europe's been heavily invested in the fight. Ukraine's been heavily invested in the fight. Russia's been heavily invested in the fight. But it's basically put on this pose that either it can be a broker or that it can unilaterally sort of set the terms for its withdrawal. And I think Europe has been a little bit mischievous about it, and I don't think they have themselves appropriate sort of peace process. But they are right to say that, that there's not going to be any peace building process unless all of the parties of this war find a way to build a peace together, ultimately, some way or the other. And then really not going to be able to end the war unless all the parties find a way to, a satisfactory way to end the war together. So, we can say it's going to end on the battlefield, but it never really fully ends on the battlefield. It ends on the, both the diplomatic table and also the society afterwards that actually has to pick up the pieces and work it out. So there needs to be some process that's going to, take people over that bridge. And the problem at the moment is, America's, sort of flailing around suggesting all sorts of half-baked processes to do it. Russia is looking at America and the US and Europe and saying, well, Europe, there's just too many ideological zealots in the EU for us to, go anywhere near those people. And we might be, I mean, in any case, our principal objective at this point is to minimize the military support of the United States. So let's just deal with them. But that doesn't solve Russia's problem entirely either, because Russia needs to find a enduring political solution in Ukraine, an enduring social solution, and ultimately some sort of diplomatic security sort of solution as well. So ultimately, at some point, Russia is also going to have to find a way to talk with these people, which is why I say there's. I mean, people like Kaya Kallas are going to have to go, I think, and probably Ursula von der Leyen as well.
Yeah.
Will actually need to go before there's really an ability to actually resolve the process, because they've just been so committed to these sort of aggressive military sort of rhetoric and all the rest of it. But the crisis of events will drive people forward, and the institutional needs will ultimately take over from the needs of the individual leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Kaya Kallas. And when Ukraine is utterly defeated on the battlefield and utterly wrecked socially, it would be nice if some of these leaders had the sense to say, "Oh my God, we made a terrible, terrible mistake. Let's stop this now." But it's going to sadly require a little bit more of that sort of pain. But ultimately, that's going to force those people out, I think.
Do you think Victoria Nuland looks at this, or Hillary Clinton looks at this, or any of these people look at this and say, "Oh my God, we've made a terrible mistake"?
No, I don't.
Exactly.
But there was the kind of self-confidence and self-belief and conviction about your opinions is the thing that drives these politicians into their roles. Like, you really have to have a lot of chutzpah and self-belief to become a politician, because they're, I mean, as average in intelligence as any one of us, and their capability to process the issues is no different to any of us, and they're given some pretty complex events, but they're very, very confident in their opinions and their assessments about the issues. And think Peter Navarro. I mean, really.
Yeah. This is Modi's law. Arrogant Indian.
But the events will defeat them ultimately, and they'll retire and they'll get pushed out, or they'll lose elections or whatever, and they'll sort of go off and write their memoirs and how every decision they made was perfect. But the facts will speak otherwise, and everyone else will have to just adjust to the reality. It's sort of like, the someone who's made a terrible mistake in a room, and everyone just sort of quietly shuffles away, in embarrassment from them, in a way, I think. So I don't think it's sort of everyone's replaceable, including in politics. And I think such a catastrophic era as this sort of Ukraine war has been for both Europe and the United States, and more than anyone also for Ukraine, Ukrainian leadership. It won't be that there won't be any sort of requests for, no one will say sorry, no one will seek forgiveness, no one will do anything halfway dignified. Their memories will be sort of vilified. They'll be like, the Vichy regime in World War II in France and things like that. They're all the collaborators. That's part of the hard lesson, I think, of war and international conflicts for internal domestic politics. It does just drive out the sort of incompetence in the end, I think.
Really
At least
think
I think so. But I mean, there's so much tragedy and horror and terrible things that could be avoided, but you just can't see how this group of people can have the capability or whatever to deal with it. But the problems are still there, and so the society, the institutions themselves are going to actually have to face those problems at the moment, because they'll be presented to them directly. They'll be presented to them in the battlefield losses. They'll be presented to them in the refugee crisis, in the economic collapse, in the financial bailout of Ukraine, in the the neo-Nazi sort of terrorist attacks in Europe after the conflict. I mean, we've in Australia, we've had some weirdo neo-Nazis sort of do demonstrations on the streets of Melbourne over the last couple of days. It's sort of like, what? Where the hell did that come from? And people are in genuine shock about it. So I do think, in a way, when the mess gets really bad, people will sort of start to move on, and it won't necessarily. I mean, people will just be as the average level of competence and all the rest of it, but they'll be forced to actually consider some alternative solutions. And I think that's where, where people are consistent, haven't sort of gone down the devil's path, if you like, of fighting evil with evil. If they've retained a commitment to sort of multilateralism and all that sort of stuff, it can create an opportunity to sort of discover some different solutions. I hope, at least that's the sort of hope that I kind of live with.
I appreciate that hope. I just get the sense that they've seeded Europe with such Russophobia, hatred of Russia, that they have wed themselves so closely to this particular point of view, that democracy in Europe is a fragile thing. I mean, if you look at what they did to Romania, if you look at what they did to Marie Le Pen, even the AfD in Germany, where they have these guys under police surveillance, and you think to yourself, okay, why are you doing that? Well, they're doing that because they don't want these people to win. And they're using mechanisms of, let's say, this bureaucracy to try to effectuate their will of preventing political parties to get into play that could actually say, we're out. We don't want to do this. We're sick of this. This was stupid. Russian oil is destroying us. I mean, not having it is destroying our industries. I mean, look at the UK. The UK may have to apply for an IMF loan. France may have to apply for IMF loan. These places are in financial destitution or devastation. Germany, the companies that have been going belly up in Germany, same thing in France. All of this are issues of policy, not acts of God. And they keep going with this idea that we still need to give $100 billion to Ukraine to buy weapons from the United States, who's going to charge us a 10% markup on top of it to do it. This is outrageous. Like, if I'm a German citizen, like, I'd be, just banging my hand on the, my head on the desk at this point. But they keep going. So I don't know how. To me, this kind of like, can you negotiate with Hitler? And I know that's hyperbolic, but the answer, of course, is no, meaning there are some personalities that you can't negotiate with. They just have to lose. And it seems that Europe has wrapped itself in this idea that we are superior, we're morally better. We have this exceptionalism, even though we don't see it in the mirror, we just believe it with a firm determination, that they need to lose and lose brimmingly. And it's like, how do you do that? Russia wants a deal. They want a deal. That's the wild part about it. They would have taken a deal early on. They would have taken the deal in Istanbul. They tried to take the deal in Minsk. Under no circumstances was a deal open, because the way the Europeans looked at it is Russia must be defeated. And we believe we can do it. And then when they realize, oh my God, we can't do it, we still have this kernel of belief somewhere in
Yeah.
us that we can keep going, or at the very least, we don't want to look like an asshole by losing this badly as we lose badly. Like that is a horrible recipe.
Yeah.
I don't know, Jeff. You may be right where there's a come to Jesus moment,
Could
but
be wrong too. But I
yeah,
mean, my hunch is that Europe's supremacism is more redeemable than the United States is. And there are signs that that's happening. Like Fitzo's just met with Putin and made comments in that regard. There's Orban. There's a possibility of Czech Republic changing its sort of political stance as well. There are politicians influential in Italy who are pretty dismissive of the Ukraine war effort. So there are, more signs than perhaps one might think about that there might be some signs for change. And the thing about foreign policy is ultimately it's a pretty small network of people who do need to change. It's not like you have to get 50% of the vote for anything. You just need to change the minds of, it's a relatively small network of key people who are primarily driven by pretty practical considerations, really, in the end. Like, our country's going down to gurgler. We've got to shift things. It's going to be a bit embarrassing for a couple of months, but, what the hell? I've done worse.
See, you've been behind the machine. That's why I always enjoy talking to people who've been in the mix. Because when you talk to people who are outside of it, they look at it as, in my experience, people who are outside of it are far more cynical than people who are inside of it.
Yeah.
Like conversation after conversation after conversation. It's like if a person was a diplomat, if a person worked in government, if a person did so and so, they seem to have a larger belief that no, these people are changeable, or these people. See, I don't know what's in their minds, and because I don't know what's in their minds, I'm looking at them from a certain point of view in regards to okay, this is what they've said and this is what they've done. But as you point out, no, they can change their minds.
Yeah, and politicians are they're often not really strategists. They're more people who are kind of, they're almost like philanthropists. You could think of them as philanthropists or you could think of them as gamblers. They're saying, I'm going to take a bet on that guy. Like with Donald Trump, it's very much you can hear it in the way he talks. So I like the way you talk, or I like the way you look. He looks good in front of the cameras. And any day of the week, a politician will be presented with 1,000 madcap ideas to sort of solve the country's problems, and they kind of make they say, sort of that guy's got a bit of initiative and gumption, and he's got a lot of money. Let's back his idea. But they're often not as kind of vested in. I mean, some of them are genuine ideologues and all that sort of stuff, but they're often not so vested in the actual ideas and the projects. They're absolutely vested in making themselves look as good as possible and never making a mistake and all that kind of stuff. But if a project doesn't work out, the thing you learn in government is everyone gets things wrong all the time, and the fact that your theory about something or your grand plan, reality turned out to be a little bit more complex. That's just like the daily experience that you have in government, and so pivoting and adjusting to new realities is a very, very common experience. So that's why I say once the realities change in a way that forces some people out and gives some people scope to maneuver, things could change for the better. I mean, it's always possible, especially when Donald Trump's in the presidency, that there'll be some wild catastrophic era as well. But
your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah.
From your mouth to God's ears, Jeff. We will see.
We will
Jeff,
see.
thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy these conversations. Like I said, talking to people who've been behind it is interesting, just in the way that they see it, because they've seen how the mechanics work in a way that I haven't seen how the mechanics and the mechanisms work. Jeff Rich. Jeff Rich is an author, historian, podcaster who worked 33 years in government. He's now retired, currently lives in Melbourne, Australia. Jeff has spent a lifetime of studying history and how knowledge of historical currents can help give context to changing political world or changing world. You can find Jeff on YouTube channel, The Burning Archive, and on Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay? Have a good night.
You too, Jamal. Ciao.
Bye-bye. All right. Jeff is